We're in the middle of a 4-part series dedicated to exercising. In week 1, we discussed why we should exercise, how it improves our physical and emotional health, and what to do in the pre-workout phase, or the warm-up. Last week, we talked about the workout phase. How much to exercise? Should you change up your routine? Should you exercise when you're sick? And where to get help with your exercise routine options. This week, we'll get answers to what is caffeine? Where does it come from? How does it affect the body? Is it okay to use caffeine with exercise? And what are caffeine alternatives? Caffeine is a natural stimulant, most commonly found in tea, coffee, and cacao plants. It works by stimulating the brain and central nervous system. We need it. We wake up feeling groggy and need something to wake us up. Often it's a cup of coffee, or 2 or 3, but who's counting? We know a couple more hours of sleep would really help us to feel refreshed, but sometimes we just don't have that extra time, so we reach for another cup, or a chocolate bar, or a cup of tea. Feeling tired does not feel good, and we need a quick fix. The problem is when we start to rely on the coffee instead of taking care of ourselves. The more tired we get, the more caffeine we need, the worse our food choices become, and the more irritable we get from it all. It's a vicious cycle, but it's one that can be broken. The goal is to balance health and wellness by getting enough sleep, eating nutritiously, and cutting out junk and chemicals in our food so that we can wake up refreshed. Welcome everyone to episode number 15. Today we're going to be discussing caffeine and the effects it can have on exercise. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Kell.
Thank you, Nikki.
All right. Today I wanted to get started with a quote that I really liked. If you are working on something that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you. And that's by Steve Jobs, who you know as well as I do, that created some massively amazing stuff.
Successful businessman.
Very successful.
It's so sad that his life was cut short. But yes, he left quite a legacy on the world.
Definitely a doer.
Yes.
And so today we're going to be talking about caffeine, which can get people going and doing, right? A lot of people, it's their first thing that they touch in the morning.
Yes. We kind of in the last segments we've been going through, we went through the pre-workout and last time the workout, and we were going to get into the post-workout, and we will do that in the next segment, but as I was thinking about that post-workout, I thought about it. I forgot to talk about caffeine. It's so big in exercise today and taken by so many people in different forms, everything from coffee to power drinks to now they're even making so-called healthy things with it. And so I think people need to really understand caffeine and why it really isn't that great for you.
I laughed because I was thinking about something back when I was a bevertainer in Las Vegas. I remember trying to lose weight, and I took this supplement that had caffeine in it, and it was not good for you, I don't think. But it got me going, got me working out. I took it before I worked out. But then I looked at the ingredients after I stopped taking it. I was like, oh, that's crazy. What's in that? But caffeine was in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's been used in diet pills for a long time.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so what is caffeine?
What is caffeine? Well, I can't do the definition justice, so I'm just going to read this right here so you can get a basic understanding, and then I'll talk about it.
Okay.
It says caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant of the even these words sometimes are hard to pronounce. Methylhexane class.
I was going to say
that. It is the world's most widely consumed psychoactive drug. Psychoactive. That's why so many people are crazy out there. See,
that's how it makes me.
Unlike many psychoactive substances, it is legal and unregulated in nearly all parts of the world. There are I can't speak today. There are several. I got to do some of those mouth exercises. There are several known mechanisms of action to explain the effects of caffeine. So we're going to talk about that today.
Central nervous system stimulant.
Yes, central nervous system stimulant.
Brain, and what else?
Well, they kind of wanted to cover before I really get into it where caffeine comes from. I think people are curious. Do they manufacture it somewhere?
Yeah.
Actually comes from plants.
What?
Yeah. A lot of caffeine in the leaves of plants, like tea. Asian teas
That's true,
have a lot of caffeine in them. Coffee beans, of course, have a lot of caffeine in them. So when they make the pills, they extract it from those sources. But everybody, they're drinking tea someplace in the world, or they're drinking coffee. Just kind of a typical thing. And of course, they throw caffeine into soda drinks and
where do they
the
get that
power
caffeine
drinks.
from?
Well, that's synthesized from the plants. And actually, I haven't read anything, but who knows? Maybe somebody's manufacturing it in a synthetic form someplace.
Yeah.
But I believe the majority of it is extracted and then put into those drinks. They're even making drinks now for people who exercise, not just the power drinks, but diet drinks and other things, and it's getting ridiculous on how much the caffeine is being used. And I thought it important that people understand really what's happening in their body, why it isn't so good for them, and before we move on to the post-workout phase.
Yeah.
But so you kind of know where it comes from. So let's talk about how it affects the body. Well, when it enters the body and the body starts to absorb it and utilize it, it causes vasodilation in the extremities and vasoconstriction in the brain and around the heart.
Wait, what does that mean? Dilation versus constriction, sorry.
Okay, there's increased blood flow to your extremities, to your arms and legs.
Okay, so we're getting more blood in our arms and legs.
We're getting more blood out there, so hence why people think it's beneficial when exercising.
Oh, that makes sense.
The thing that they're ignoring is it constricts or slows down the blood flow to the brain and the heart.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it can increase blood pressure because of that. The heart's having to pump harder. You have blood going to the heart, supplying the heart muscle with blood. So they can function. And then the heart, being a pump, pumps that blood around the body. And so when you constrict or slow down the blood flow around the heart, it decreases the functionability of the heart itself. So now it's not pumping the blood correctly. It's having to work harder to get it. So even though you're getting increased flow to the arms and the legs, the heart now has to pump harder to get it out there. So you're stressing the heart more. And chronic stressing of the heart over time is really not good. There's been stories in the news a few years back about some kids who drank like half a dozen
Monster
caffeine drinks and died. And it just was too much for their system.
That's crazy.
Caffeine acts on the nervous system. And specifically, it's working on the adenosine receptors. And what those receptors do, I think it's phosphoesterase, what happens, one of the reasons that you feel good when it's actually a mood raiser when you put caffeine in your body, it tends to give you a little lift in your emotions. One of the reasons it does that is because it's affecting the receptors that actually calm you down and help you relax.
So it calms you down?
No, it has the opposite effect.
Oh.
What it's doing is it's inhibiting the receptor, the enzyme receptors, and the neurotransmitters are now not functioning like they should. So what would normally relax you, the caffeine affects that receptor. So now you're not getting that relaxed state. Funny sideline. Some of the drugs that are created for erectile dysfunction work on those same receptors. But it's working specifically in certain areas so that the blood's increased to those certain parts of the body that are related to those activities. If you get my
Makes
meaning.
sense. Yep.
So it does lift your mood, but it's a temporary thing, and but it is considered a benefit. It also makes people think that they work faster. But the reality of it is you really don't work much faster. You just think you're working much faster. It can give people the jitters. A lot of people who take caffeine, they'll kind of get the shakes from it. And that's, again, it's an overabundance of the substance in their body, and so neurologically it's causing the shakes, the caffeine shakes. You've heard people talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's not, I do not recommend people take caffeine before working out, even though the majority of people out there are doing it, mainly because it can cause damage to the heart. It can also inhibit brain function. People think they're smarter on caffeine.
Yeah.
Actually, studies show that you're dumber on caffeine because you've decreased the blood flow to the brain. However, having said that, if you study on caffeine, you should test on caffeine because your brain needs that. In fact, if you're a chronic caffeine user, you drink coffee every day, or power drinks or whatever, or the energy drinks, your body accommodates to that. It craves it, it uses it, but it gives you a chronic dysfunction of often people who drink a lot of caffeine have a hard time going to sleep at night. And that's one of the reasons, because the neurotransmitters and the chemicals that work inside your body to slow your systems down are being inhibited by the caffeine. Or not only inhibited, but maybe you're not, you've come off the caffeine, but there's still dysfunction of those parts of your body because that chemical process is still being inhibited, even though the caffeine may have left your system because it's become chronically inhibited. Getting off the caffeine, people, anybody who uses a lot of caffeine and then tries to go off it will deal with headaches, and that's usually headaches and other symptoms, anxiety. Well, chronic use of caffeine, if you got anxiety or depression problems, it could be linked back to the coffee or the caffeine use. So if you're somebody prone to anxiety and depression, get off the coffee. It only can aggravate that whole emotional side of things. Any questions, Nikki?
Okay, so it sounds like we shouldn't be doing exercise and caffeine together, but a lot of the supplements that people take have it in there. So why are they doing that?
Because people think they need it, and it's addictive. That's why Coca-Cola originally, from what I understand, had cocaine in their drink because people liked what it did for you. It didn't just taste good. It
made you feel good, huh?
It made you feel real good. And so after it was outlawed, obviously they needed a substitute. And so caffeine actually was a better substitute because it
was legal.
Cocaine in and of itself in its base form, the powder, is not addictive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
I don't know that.
But they alter it in many ways, and then add things to it, and that becomes addictive. But
does cocaine come from a plant?
Cocaine comes from the plant. So I spent some time in South America, and it comes from plants, cocoa plant in South America.
Cocoa plant.
Cocaine comes from the coca leaf, and it's grown widely throughout the northern parts of South America and southern parts of Central America, where the weather's just right in the tropics there. In fact, it was even approached by some, at the time, this was back in the early 80s, and a lot of indigenous people still living in the mountains, and they would chew on these leaves to come down out of the mountains. And so I was offered that one time.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Didn't take any, but
no?
they would sell it, so they get a little money and walk back up in the mountains.
Wow.
And they could walk for miles on the stuff. Gave them energy. Anyway, the caffeine took the place of cocaine, and has just become, it's in everything because it's addictive and people want it, and it's a bit of a mood booster, and it makes people feel like they're more energetic. They do get up and do more because they feel in a better mood.
Yeah.
So it has that effect. The problem is long-term use of it can damage your health, and there's many health. It's funny in our society how money always takes precedence. Just follow the money with any kind of thing going on in whether it's political or what. It's always about the money, and caffeine's about the money. They're not telling people that caffeine's bad for you because people, they're making billions of dollars off caffeine. Billions of dollars a year. It's a huge industry. So to tell everybody they shouldn't be taking it, it's like cigarettes. Cigarettes were, forever people were smoking and promoting smoking and ignoring what it would do for you. Well, they're doing the same thing with caffeine. I really think the day will come where there'll be a real push to get caffeine out of people. Is it going to kill you? No, my mother's 88 and she drank coffee all her life. She's not very healthy at 88 now. Got all kinds of health problems.
Well, what about, is a little bit okay? I mean, can you have balance, like a little bit of caffeine, a little bit of chocolate? Just
I always say
asking for a friend.
When people are in denial of something, they always ask those kinds of questions. Even though I know you don't drink coffee or take caffeine, but it's a good question because you're serving the audience out there, not just yourself as the host,
I eat
right?
chocolate.
You'll eat chocolate. Okay, small amount of caffeine and chocolate. One of the reasons that people always say, "Oh, coffee makes me feel better." Well, that's one of the reasons it makes you feel better because of the caffeine. It gives you a little mood boost. And it is a much smaller amount than what's in coffee. Everybody's got to decide for themselves a little bit now and then. I mean, are you going to become addicted to chocolate? That's one of the reasons you go back and keep eating chocolate.
I know.
It's because of the caffeine in there, and it tastes good, of course. Yeah, up to you. You want to have a little bit here and there. It's addictive. Usually, I drank soda for years, and I would say I think they need rehab for people who have addictions to soda and all that stuff too, because it's not good for you. The soda has other ill effects besides the coffee. Coffee has many other ill effects besides the caffeine. So does soda. Really hard on your pancreas and some people have ironclad a pancreas that's bulletproof and can take just about anything till something else wears out. But a lot of people out there can't. It all comes to, we're talking about health and wellness here. We throw out information and hope it benefits people and inspires them to change their lives and improve their lives when it comes to their health and wellness, because it also will improve their happiness if they're feeling good. But you do with what people will do with it, whatever they will. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet now, and 6 billion taking caffeine is pretty tough to stop or slow down. It's a huge industry. So. But if you're dealing with things like anxiety, depression, or feel like you got to have that coffee in the morning because you can't function without it, go into a week's worth of rehab, even if it's just home isolation with a friend, and break the habit, get off it. You can get off of caffeine fairly easy compared to many drugs, even though it's addictive. Your withdrawals are mainly headaches and people experience different things. That's probably the biggest one. And after a few days, you're off of it, and you go on. You're supposed to ask a question.
Well, I was thinking back to like when I was younger, and my grandparents would drink coffee all day long. Like I remember my grandpa being like, "Emma, get me a cup of coffee," and we made him say like, "Please and thank you." My sister and I, we were like, "You at least have to say please and thank you, Grandpa. Come on." But anyway, they'd drink it all day long, and they were smokers too. So I don't know if like one went with the other back then, but I feel like the younger generation is not so much coffee drinkers as like alternative things such as tea or I don't know what other things are out there.
They're still down in the caffeine. They are doing it. It does seem like there's a move away from coffee. Still, lots of young people drink it, but all the energy drinks are extremely popular among youth and. College kids, people drink it a lot to study for tests because they can stay up later and keep cramming and just don't forget. Not that I'm encouraging the use of that. If you're studying with it, you should test with it. Studies show that mainly because you don't want to be having a little caffeine withdrawal during the exam, and that's really the side effect. It's not that caffeine made you smarter. It's just that your body's functioning a certain way under the influence of the caffeine, and you want that. You when you've placed all that information into your memory, while studying, it did it in the presence of caffeine. So you want to continue that, so you can recall the information you've learned in that way. Again, not encouraging it, just giving you information that I'm aware of.
Well, gosh, thank you so much for bringing that topic to heart. I mean, I didn't even think about what is caffeine, where does it come from? I've never even thought about that, to be honest with you. And I didn't realize that it was so, that it can hurt the heart and affect people like that.
And the brain.
And the brain, yeah.
The brain.
It's good to know that information.
So if you're down in lots of caffeine before exercise, not a good thing. Stop. I would recommend not doing that anymore. Your body will readjust.
So, what would you take as an alternative to caffeine?
Well, for that boost, you know, people want the boost, the lift.
They wake
that
up in the
get
morning,
from the
they
caffeine.
need their caffeine.
They're
need their
like, one of the reasons people wake up feeling so poorly is because they're addicted to caffeine. They're really not sleeping deeply at night. Even though the caffeine has left their system, the neurotransmitters, the way the nervous system works, it's now actually, once the caffeine's gone, the body starts saying, I need more caffeine. Even though it's very mild, it builds and builds and builds, and then you get increased blood flow to the brain, which causes the headaches. And so one of the reasons that they get the boost from it is because they're on a down. They just went down from not having it. Their system's reacting, the body's reacting and craving more, and therefore they get more and they get that boost. Now the circulation changes, even though it decreases to the brain. It's a mood because of the way it affects the neurotransmitters of the brain. It makes you think you feel better, even though you're causing more damage to your body. So what are the alternatives? Quit using it. Stop using it within a few days. The effects of it will fade during that time if you go through the withdrawal process. Drink lots of fluids, exercise, and drinking lots of fluids helps work that out of your system faster. Sweat it out. And so the effects will not be as long lasting if you can do that. As far as an alternative, if you really anything you go and start putting in your body, for instance, ginkgo is one where people feel that gives them a lift. So if, that's something you can do. The real benefit, I mean, to really find a balance and health and wellness here are, from my perspective, it's not to go find something that's going to give you a lift. It's to get into the habit of eating properly and eating nutritiously. Sleeping the proper amount of time at night. I like the old adage of, Benjamin Franklin. Franklin, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think is accredited with the idea of early to bed, early rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I think that's true.
Yeah.
And so you get rid of all the junk that's affecting your body in an effort to benefit it. All the chemicals and stuff we put in our system messes up all the natural chemical processes that are taking place in our system. You eat right, unless you have a genetic defect of some kind, your body's going to function with the right nutrients in it to its optimum levels. And so you're going to feel better, you're going to work better, you're not going to wake up in the morning all like dead to the world and got to have my cup of coffee just to get going. You're going to wake up refreshed because you've had a good night's sleep, and then you're going to go either do some light exercise in the morning to get things pumping and get a little motivation to get the blood flowing. You can naturally get the blood flowing in your system by just doing some 5 minutes of a little exercise. Go have a light breakfast. If you're going to go do a workout in the morning, I would say that light breakfast should consist of just things like smoothie or juice, not sugary juices, but more like vegetable juices before your workout, or just go work out and then afterwards have breakfast. Forget the caffeine. You don't need it. Eat right.
Yeah. I know, I went to bed during the 11 o'clock hour a couple nights in a row this week, and I just woke up feeling drained. But if I get to bed during the 10 o'clock hour, I wake up feeling refreshed. So even that little 30 to 45 minutes of extra sleep really makes a difference for me. I don't know if it does for you guys.
Well, we're going to do a segment on sleep, Nikki. And sleep is an interesting thing and an interesting process, and all kinds of things involved with sleep. And so we'll bring that up in a future
podcast.
Wow, I'm tongue-tied this morning. But yes, sleep's a big one, and I can go on for 10 minutes just about why your sleep ratios are off, and it has oftentimes more to do with the time you wake up, because your brain goes in 90-minute cycles when you're sleeping, than it does to do with the necessarily amount of sleep. You can have a really good night's sleep. Here's a little blurb since you mentioned it. If you're sleeping okay, but you're waking up really tired, try setting your alarm for 15 minutes earlier or 15 minutes later. You'll likely notice a difference in how you feel when you wake up, because because your mind or your brain is functioning, your body's healing itself when you sleep, and it's functioning in a 90-minute cycle in your brain, and your brain goes from different brainwave patterns, alpha to delta, and different levels of delta. And if you wake up in low delta, you're going to feel all groggy. If you wake up in theta, which is usually where you want to be, you'll actually feel pretty good, or delta 1.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So a whole lot there.
All right.
We could have probably more than one podcast on sleep.
Yeah,
Hey.
for sure. Well, thank you so much for discussing caffeine with us. And it sounds like we need to get more sleep and eat healthy and try to get off the caffeine as best we can. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, if you learned something, or if you know somebody who's addicted to caffeine, like so many of us, maybe.
Or maybe we need to start a support group, Nikki.
Yeah, let's do a support group.
Our own AAA for
Caffeine. What is it?
CAA, huh?
I'm really on top of this one.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yes.
everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So we're gonna come up with caffeine coaches.
Caffeine coaches, there you go. I love that. Yes, let's all get a caffeine coach. So if you need a caffeine coach and you know somebody that needs a caffeine coach, please share this podcast
You need a special
with them.
location to go through your withdrawals. Maybe
Yeah.
we can help.
We'll set up a Zoom call. All right. Well, thanks you guys for joining us today. We'll talk to you next week.
While we make every effort to broadcast correct information, we are still learning. We will double check all facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor may have a different way of doing things from another. We are simply presenting our views on how to live a healthy lifestyle that will be as evidence-based as possible. We welcome any comments, suggestions, or corrections of errors. We take no money from drug or device companies. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast. Under no circumstances shall Dr. Kell Fullerton or any guests or any contributors to the podcast or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Dr. Kell Fullerton be responsible for damages arising from use of this podcast. This blog should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis of expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. Our website, blog, and podcasts are all HIPAA compliant. While you may give your email address to subscribe to the website posts or to post information on the website blog, we will never share your email address or contact information with any third parties without your explicit permission. The contents of Health Talk with Dr. Kell podcast and the show notes are all copyrighted. All blog posts, podcasts, and show notes that are distributed to the public for free can be redistributed via hard copy or electronic copy for free only if Health Talk with Dr. Kell is included as the acknowledged author within the actual media that is being redistributed. The Health Talk with Dr. Kell podcast is a production of the Orange Stack, with executive producers Dr. Kell Fullerton and Eric Hammond and host Nikki Sterling.